Hi, I'm Ember Conley, your host for Political Peaks. I'm joined today with Tom Fisher, Summit County Manager. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ember.
Let's start right away talking about where we are with the budget. I know that you're getting ready to pass your budget with the council, but also what impacts that COVID has made to your budget.
Well, let me start with a little bit of history first, because obviously the COVID impact started during the first quarter of this current year, and we very aggressively adjusted the budget twice in order to react to that, mainly around reducing the amount of work we were going to be able to accomplish in our work plan, and then to react to an expected drop in revenues. So we dropped our budget by about 12% at that time. So that took it from a $61 million budget down to a $52 or $53 million budget for 2020. So going into this next year, knowing that we had a really good sales tax first quarter in 2020 because we were still open in 2020, and that's going to be much different at the beginning of 2021. We were again being conservative going into 2021. So our budget is only about 2.5% above the adjusted 2020 levels, almost 7% below what our original 2020 budget was. So leading into the next year, you can expect that we will adjust our work plan to be a little less aggressive than we were at the end of 2019 leading into 2020. And we're going to make sure that we have enough resources and time to continue to react to the pandemic, because we're going to have effects on our county services in regards to that through the third quarter of 2021 at least. And so those are the overall things that are kind of guiding us at this point.
You know, last night, Summit County, in partnership, of course, with the Health Department and Project for Deeper Understanding, put together a panel of experts that really represent different sectors of our community. And throughout the evening, there were some common trends that we kept hearing. First of all, is there enough tests? What's the turnaround on the tests? And so we received lots of information last night. But I think one of the overarching questions or feelings that was brought forth was, we're saying that we're putting all of these measures in and that we're safe to open, and the ski resort is open and restaurants are open. But yet there's also that maybe contradictory statement of stay at home, do your part, don't gather socially. What are the main messages from the county that you want to convey both to the visitors and to residents here in Summit County?
So I think the main thing is that, you know, short of what we did in the spring, and Mike Gore talked about that a lot last night, you know, which was shutting down the resorts, essentially shutting down the economy, full stay-at-home orders except for essential services. You've heard Dr. Bola talk a lot about how much we've learned over this year in dealing with different peaks and valleys in case counts and how our hospitals react to this, and hospital capacity and staffing. And, you know, it's a balancing act against all of those, or between all of those things. We need to have our economy operating within the context of the state of Utah that wants its economy operating. Right. That's what supports everything that we do in government. It certainly supports everybody's livelihoods that is employed in those systems and relies on those systems to make a living. At the same time, we want to keep people as safe as possible, which, you know, we had a long conversation last night about hospital capacity and how that's being managed, and can we keep ourselves active enough in our medical care so that the surges don't overwhelm us and cause problems. So those two things being out there to balance, and then realizing that our economy is based on tourism and people visiting here, and our employment base is coming from outside of our county largely. We're having to balance all of those things in what we do, not only from a regulation standpoint, whether it be masking or social distancing or different types of protocols within business. It's also the personal responsibility of how whether you send your kids to school or not because of symptoms, or whether you go to work or not because of symptoms, or whether you regulate your family gathering activity because you're trying to reduce the spread. Our message is that, it goes back to what we've been saying. We're all in this together. And whether we're working in a restaurant, managing a lodging property, going to ski, or hosting some family for a get-together, we all have a role, and we want people to be as responsible as possible.
Exactly. We've talked about, of course, just the impact of COVID throughout our county, and we've stayed focused on this side of Park City. But on the eastern side of Summit County, it looks like sales tax has actually increased. What can you maybe share around why, or maybe just trends that you are seeing on different sides of the county?
Well, it's interesting because we've been following that all summer and with great interest. I would say basically that because we think that people in our state traveled closer to home more often than they did to other places, that our mountains, especially Mirror Lake, Smith and Morehouse, Chalk Creek, all of those areas experienced more tourism than they've ever seen before, or at least in recent memory. And we monitor that closely because we have Sheriff's Office services, fire, our Forest Service contacts all look at that. And all of that activity traveling through Summit County to reach those places, they spend money in our businesses, and they were spending more money in our eastern businesses than we've seen in the past. So that's probably the impetus of a lot of that. Also, probably more folks staying home, either in the unincorporated county in the west, which also experienced pretty stable sales tax revenue compared to last year. And then on the east side, people staying closer to home probably meant that they were spending their dollars closer to home also. So, the combination of those two things. Now, you contrast that with Park City, which saw larger decreases in sales tax revenue year over year, a direct impact because of a lack of tourism to that place. So that's what we think is happening, and I'm sure there's others that have further analysis into that.
As we wrap up, I think one of the last things that we are seeing in both Summit County, Wasatch County, has been our real estate. It seems that real estate is a really, really hot commodity. And then just some interesting facts around some of those maybe secondary parts of people remodeling their homes and improving their homes and staying home. And so the galleries on Main Street have seen a significant increase. Any other interesting tidbits to share around what maybe the other industries are seeing?
Well, I mean, I think that those are interesting, and I don't have enough awareness of a comparison to another year to say whether that's unusual or not. Certainly, we've seen an increase in retail establishments in the unincorporated county and how they have changed their position comparatively to other sales tax sources that we traditionally see be in the top 10, for instance, in a given month in the summer or fall. So we know there's more spending going on around people's homes, and whether that's because homes are turning over, property is turning over or not, or they're just spending on their current dwelling. Can't tell that, but there does seem to be more expenditure there. Another thing that's interesting, though, this phenomenon of folks escaping to more rural places like ourselves, that hasn't played out in the school enrollments. So it's a little difficult to tell whether that's happening or not. It also doesn't seem to have played out in those applying for a tax break on their personal residence because they're a primary residence versus a secondary residence. So it's really hard to know from our perspective in local government whether that's happening as dramatically as people think it is.
Right, and I think so much of it, just what you said, is still anecdotal, right? It's the conversations that are happening among neighbors and family members that we're seeing these things, but yet we don't quite have the numbers to go with them.
Right, and it's probably going to be 2 or 3 years before we really know.
Right. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today, but most importantly for your leadership during this really unprecedented time, wintering through the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Love being here.
I'm Ember Conley, your host for Political Peaks. Remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Park City TV and over the air and on our Comcast channels.